Wow, what a question. You know, Equine Affaire was one of my favorite times in those 32 years I was on the road. And remind yourself that I did my demonstrations in 41 countries. And Equine Affaire was so fantastic because the huge crowds, the booth there where I could meet people was incredible. And watching other horsemen do their demonstrations too. Some of the greatest stories I have to tell you are about Equine Affaire. And it was a fantastic adventure. The only problem was when you have other demonstrators coming after you, you have to give up the ring at the proper time and get out of there so that the next one is on without delaying them. Whoa, did I come close. I recall once in Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, when I was so nervous about loading the horse, the non-loader. And the non-loaders were fantastic for me. And Equine Affaire would bring me any number of non-loaders because they had non-loaders that didn't even come because they were non-loaders, but they couldn't get there, so they rode there. Really, it's the truth. And in this particular occasion, I had to give the ring up to the next demonstration. I think it was John Lyons. And I wasn't getting it done. And my son said, "Dad, you got 20 more minutes." What? I'm looking at the clock and it only had 2 or 3 minutes on it. But I took a breath. And the horse loaded immediately and I left the arena on time. It shows you what you can do with the core of your body and how much the horse relies upon you relaxing and taking care not to be tense. It was a fantastic experience, and each of the Equine Affairs were fantastic experiences for a lot of reasons. You know, treating myself, rewarding myself for a job well done, or at least what I would consider to be well done, a successful adventure with a horse. How do I treat myself? Wow, this is an easy one for me. I love my horses and I spend time with them. And I love my deer and I spend time with them. And what a reward it is. What a trophy I get for sitting down with, last night it was 20 individual deer. Some will come close to me, some will allow me to rub on them. After 48 years of working with this family group, they teach me so much. It's unbelievable. They're flight animals. And yet, they are 10 to 100 times more flighty than the horse. Which means, if you get it wrong, they charge you a big price for it. And that makes a good teacher. 48 years. The first one was Grandma, and then there was Ruby, and then there was Kim, and Big Bite. And there was a little one called Benediction, who is now famous worldwide because a best-selling author wrote a chapter about benediction. Sometime you might take a chance to read that or look up benediction, come to our website and ask about benediction. I loved him so much. He was a late implant triplet. Benediction, named by the Queen. And he came to me on my birthday, May 14. In a particular year, it was his birthday too. He was still wet with amniotic fluid from being born. And it was 2018. Benediction is dead and gone because his internal vital organs were not large enough and developed enough to support an adult. But oh boy, did we have 435 precious days, Benediction and me. And the Queen named him Benediction because he was a blessing. And she said, you can call him Ben or you can call him Benny. But he needs a proper name. And his proper name is Benediction, which means a blessing. Oh, I said, Your Majesty, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I'm going to call him Benny the Blessing. And Her Majesty said, you Americans, you would give him a mobster's name, wouldn't you? So anyway, spending time with my dear and my family is a reward for me to get it right with a horse. If I had to teach a horse one thing, it would be the following: that no violence is going to come to you, and that I am going to wait until I get it right so that you want to do the thing we're trying to learn. That's what I would try to teach him. Understand, Mr. Horse, that I want you to want to do it, and I will keep working until I get it right for you to want to do it. Now, I often say that a good trainer can make a horse do almost anything he wants him to do. But the great trainer can cause the horse to want to do it. And you know that people going to work, people on the athletic field, will do a better job if they love what they're doing than they will do if they don't love what they're doing. Violence is never the answer. Violence is only for the violator and never for the victim. No one of us was born with the right to say, you must or I'll hurt you. And furthermore, it isn't as effective as causing the horse to want to do it. So if there's one thing I want to teach a horse, is that he can wait until I get it right for him to want to do it. Well, one of my favorite books is an old book. And I'm sorry to say that while my wife went to the computer and asked, and they had some used ones for sale. So maybe they still have some that can be purchased. The Queen's Rides. If there's any one person I want to know more about, and how she was raised, and what entered her mind that educated her to be the world leader that she is. And so I called Terry Pendry, one of my students, who is now the stud groom to the Queen and in charge of all of her private horses, and he rides with her every single time she rides. Terry Pendry went on the road with me in the UK and learned my concepts down to a gnat's eyelash. Terry Pendry is a fantastic guy. And I called him and I said, how do I learn more about what built the Queen? What circumstances caused her to be the world leader that she is? And he said, get the book, The Queen's Ride. The Queen rides. Like that. Yeah? So we got it. This is dedicated to some family when it was back in the time. I'm looking here because I'm going to try to give you the year that this was done. I can't really see it, but I think it was done back in the 50s or something. And the Queen's Ride, the Queen Rides, talks a lot about the people that influenced her as she worked with her horses. The Queen was virtually in jail. She was in the compounds of Windsor Castle for 5 years, from 39 to 44. And that was during the Second World War, when Adolf Hitler was trying desperately to do her in, and the royal family too, with his bombers going over constantly. They didn't catch on to what was going on, but in that period of time, 39 to 44, the British government had ways, cooperating with the United States, to tell whether the air was clear or not. And when the air was clear, Her Majesty spent time with her horses. Not other people. Princess Margaret, her sister, but not other people. Because they couldn't bring people in and out. She was locked down. And so that's a picture of the family out riding their horses at Windsor Castle. And I've been there, I've stayed in the very corridors that the Queen spent those 5 years in. And, you know, I believe that horses and her corgis, her dogs, animals in general, but there's a predator, canine, and a flight animal, Equus cabalus, the horse, a flight animal, a grazer, with the opposite set of principles of the canines. Her Majesty seemed to balance those two and bring herself along to understand that violence is not the answer. And certainly, Queen Elizabeth II sincerely believes that the Second World War, violence, was not the answer. And that it never proved anything to anybody, it never fixed anything, it never changed for the better, anything. Horses. She spent a lot of time with them, and her groom, and as it turned out, her instructor, was a man named Noel. I read about Noel in this book, and if you can get the book, I think you would enjoy it. But Noel was there teaching Her Majesty also that violence wasn't the answer in working with horses. Now, as the Queen rose to adulthood, she saw a lot of violence with horses. The eventing, the show jumping, the events that they had in England, even for the children. The pony club. Whipped and spurred and drove horses. And as I understand it, or have come to believe it, the Queen was not pleased with that sort of thing, that activity, that behavior. Because when I arrived there in 1989, with Her Majesty having heard about my principles, she sat in a soundproof booth about 20 feet higher than where I was. And I'm sure that Her Majesty felt there was a very good chance she wouldn't like what she saw. I'm certain of it. First of all, she gave one of her mother's horses to me to do the first horse. And it went really well. And her mother came to me with tears in her eyes and said it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. I caused that filly to accept her first saddle and first rider in about 27 minutes. They had never seen anything like that before. 4 to 6 weeks it takes to break a horse. That's what the Queen was told from the time she was a child. Although Noel was not violent, and he tried to teach her the power of nonviolence, but they didn't have my concepts. And so it was difficult, I'm sure. But when the Queen saw it, she knew it was her way too. And she had 23 horses there for me, none of which had a saddle on or a rider on. And I have to say that the grooms and the people in charge of the horses, all the way up to the executives of the royal stables. I said, a lot of hogwash. It's namby-pamby. One of them said that I had powder in my pocket that I took out and blew it up the horse's nose. And then it just went tranquil. A trick. And they looked for the tricks. And there's still people looking for the tricks. And you know what? There is a trick. I'm going to admit to you, Equine Affaire listeners, there is a trick. And that is to get the confidence of the horse. Show the horse that there's no violence. Reward the horse when they get it right. And operate with your horses in an environment of love and concern for them, rather than demand and orders that you give them and whips. And you will know the trick. I have done almost 70,000 horses in my time. Over 4,000 in front of public audiences in 41 countries. I have not struck a horse with a whip since 1949, when my father forced me to strike my last time with a horse. It isn't necessary. I averaged less than 30 minutes for every one of my starters to accept their first saddle and rider. My demonstrations lasted 3 hours with a half-hour break in the middle, and I did 4 or 5 horses. You figure it out. One was a starter. One would try to buck you off or have problems when you're in the saddle. Another would have problems when your feet are on the ground. All the misbehaving things of farriers and clipping and things like that. And I always finished up with the one that wouldn't load. And I would tell my owners, if I can't load your horse, I will ride it home for you. And some of them were ridden as much as 50 miles to come to my demonstrations, and I never rode one horse home. Every single horse loaded. At an equine affair, like I said, in Louisville, Kentucky, it was close. But I got it done. And never struck a one of them. Violence is not the answer. And as soon as you learn that, you will also learn the secret, which is to reward the horse and cause the horse to want to do it. Okay, what have I been doing during this incredible time of COVID-19? What have you been binging on during that time? Well, let me tell you that, first of all, COVID-19 never should have happened. And the world should have been free of COVID-19 before it ever got started. Ivermectin. The horse industry knows what it is, but we weren't told that COVID cannot live in the presence of ivermectin. And the sooner the world gets to know that, the better off we'll be. Yes, I know they want an expensive vaccination, but they could have stopped it, and thousands knew. I had 5 members of my family positive, and all of them were on ivermectin instantly, and boom, it's gone. Illness was not a problem. Death was definitely not a problem. And at 85 going on 86, I tested positive, and 24 hours later had a normal temperature, never felt sick. Ivermectin, a horse wormer. But billions of doses were given to human beings for many, many years to get rid of worms in Africa, North Korea, Afghanistan, and also India. Almost no COVID. What's the deal? So, this happened to me quite early in the COVID crisis, and I had a lot of time without being ill. I could have traveled anywhere I wanted to travel if I take my ivermectin, and everybody else does. But I have to tell you that maybe there ought to be something like COVID for every horseman on the face of the earth. Some way to take at least 60 days out of each year to just live with your animals. Get to know them better. Experiment with nonviolent ways. Use somebody's methods. See what they do. Use my methods. They're there. I've given them to you in 10 books and on the internet. Try them. Learn them. You will be amazed at how horses want to do what we're happy with them doing. They want to do it. We just have to cause them to know that we want them to do it in the absence of violence. I spent time with my deer. I love them to death. They know it. They come to see me every morning and every evening for at least an hour on each end of the day. Sometimes I spend 4, 5, 6 hours with them, just walking with them in the canyons. I know it sounds funny. It sounds hokey pokey. But they're flight animals, and flightier than any horse ever was. So when you get it right with them, you're going to get it right with your horse. I know you can't go work with deer. Everybody can't do that. But study what I've done. Take up nonviolence as the basis for sound horsemanship. You will love every minute of it. And what have I been doing? Using COVID day after day. I mean, this is a real unusual thing for me to sit and do this interview, because I have just spent time with my animals for almost a year now. I came home March the 6th of 2020 from Australia. And it was already going on here, but we didn't know what it was and so forth. It'll be gone in a month or so. Yeah. And here we are in February and it's still going. So it's just a month or so off of when I came home. But we actually had it in January, even if a lot of us didn't know it, right here in the United States. And I came from Australia, where I was working with racehorses, and they just thought it was something off in China somewhere and would never get to Australia. Boy, oh boy, did they get a surprise. Anyway, something like that should beset us every year so we spend more time with our horses, or we just get bright and choose to spend more time with our horses. It won't hurt you, and you might enjoy it too. Well, I have to tell you that my favorite form of exercising at 86, in May I'm 86, and we're sitting here in February, but I can't ride that much anymore, and it's a bit dangerous for me to ride the way I love to ride, cutting cattle and reining and all of that. I have CIDP, you can look it up if you want, but it's something that older people get when they cross up some medications and then your neurological functions go haywire and you go back and forth. I have no feeling in my fingers. And it's very difficult for me. My favorite form of exercise now is walking a lot with my deer through these canyons, foothills around here, walking up and walking down. I fall down too much because I don't have good balance now. But I'm having so much fun that I'm not going to stop doing it. Also, I have to tell you, I've taken up a hobby of making walking sticks. It's a healthy way to go, you know, when you're falling down a lot. And they were pruning some of the oaks here on our property, and I saw these sticks, and I had one stick that belonged to Benny, and I made it for him for a different way. You know, when I was walking with him, I had a rope that went from the stick to Benny's shoulder harness, so that if he ran away, it would stop in the bushes and I'd know where he is and I could get him. It was Benny's stick. The Queen saw a video of me with Benny and his stick. Well, I made another stick when Benny died so that I could walk with two sticks. And boy, oh boy, is that a big help. It really is. And for some reason, I've never been artistic in my life. But for some reason, I was able to create these sticks that look like I know something about art, because they're beautiful. And Pat does my wife does the coating of them with the varnish and lacquer, whatever it is that goes on the finish, so that they're beautiful. I sand them down and I cut them in a certain way so that they allow for a grip on the top and a foot on the bottom and stuff like that. And it's good exercise. One of the things that you have to do to make these sticks is to run a rasp over them to take the bark off and the underbark. You don't know about underbark, but there's an underbark, and it's harder to take off than the bark. The bark is easy. The underbark is very tough. And then to take off the knots and the twists and so forth and so on. Some of the twists you leave for beauty. And to find two sticks that complement one another is a lot of fun. And when you get them right, they really constitute a beautiful trophy that you have for doing the work. So yeah, I've created a new hobby of making sticks. But spending time with my deer and my horses is the most incredible experience that I've had during this time of COVID. And I suggest that all of you get a way to enjoy your animals. It might be dogs, it might be cats, it might be horses, it might be sheep, I don't know. I have 2 goats that I have fun with. I taught one to climb trees. I taught him to climb trees. He started climbing trees. And goats apparently can climb trees. I didn't even know it. But he taught me that goats can climb trees. And now I put feed bunks up in the tree, and I put a cup on a long stick, and I put the grain up there, and pew, he goes right up the tree to get the grain. It's a lot of fun. Maybe I'm just an old-fashioned, easy-to-please sort of guy. But Equine Affaire has taught me to be that way, because the people I meet there are oftentimes very similar in their enjoyment of their animals as I am. And Equine Affaire has gone a long way to creating Monty Roberts and all of the things that he has done to answer the call by the Queen to the world to take my concepts out there and work as hard as I can for the benefit of horses and the safety of horses and non-violent training. Try it. You'll love it.